It happened on a quiet afternoon in Île-d'Oléron, a small island off the French Atlantic coast. A car suddenly accelerated toward a group of pedestrians and cyclists, striking several people before crashing into a wall. 10 were injured, 2 critically. Witnesses said the driver shouted Allahu Akbar before being arrested. Police are still investigating the motive, but for many in France, it felt disturbingly familiar. Another eruption of violence in a country where such headlines have become part of daily life. Because this wasn't supposed to be France. Not the France that once stood as the cradle of reason, the home of liberty, and the world's moral compass. The country that gave the world human rights, secularism, and universal education. For centuries, France wasn't just a nation. It was an idea that believed civilization could be built through reason, that society could rise above religion and class, that the state could guarantee equality and freedom at the same time. But today, that idea feels fragile. Behind the beauty of Paris and the pride of the Republic, something is breaking. France is still a rich country, a cultural power, a democracy. Yet it's also a nation living with chronic unrest, terrorist attacks, riots, political polarization, and a deep social fatigue that seems to touch every institution. What happened in Île-d'Oléron isn't just an isolated act of violence. It's a symptom of a society that's no longer sure what it stands for, or who it includes. To understand how France reached this point, you have to go back, not to 2024, not even to 2015, but to the ideals that once made France a model for the modern world. At the end of the Second World War, France was exhausted. It had been humiliated by Nazi occupation, divided between collaborators and resistance fighters, and left with a damaged economy and a wounded identity. But out of that trauma emerged a project of national reconstruction, one that combined state power with social solidarity. Under leaders like Charles de Gaulle, France rebuilt its industries, created a modern welfare system, and regained its global voice. In just a few decades, the country transformed itself. The 1950s and 60s became the era of modernization, highways, factories, new cities. France turned into an industrial powerhouse and one of the richest countries in Europe. But unlike Germany, whose post-war recovery was defined by pragmatism, France's recovery was built on ideals. The French believed in their model of La République, a secular universal nation, where citizens were equal not because of their origins, but because of their shared belonging to the Republic. That belief was sacred. The French Republic wasn't built around ethnicity, religion, or tribe, but around values: liberty, equality, fraternity. Everyone could become French, but only by leaving behind their particular identities. Religion was a private matter. The state was neutral. This principle, called laïcité, or secularism, became the foundation of French civic life. It was meant to guarantee freedom, but also unity, and for a long time, it worked. Through the 1950s and 60s, France's economy grew rapidly. Its colonies gained independence, and many citizens from North and West Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Senegal, were invited to work in France's booming factories. Like Germany's guest workers, they were meant to stay temporarily, but they didn't. They brought families, raised children, and slowly formed new communities across French cities and suburbs. At first, integration seemed to follow the Republican script. The second generation spoke French, went to French schools, and played by French rules. But underneath, something wasn't working. These new citizens were French on paper, but they didn't feel French in daily life. They faced discrimination in jobs and housing, and many found themselves stuck in large suburban housing projects. The banlieues, built in the 1960s to house the working class. Over time, those suburbs became synonymous not with opportunity, but with exclusion. Still, the Republic believed its model was strong enough to absorb any difference. To talk about ethnic identity or religion was considered un-French. The state didn't collect data on race or religion, and politicians avoided discussing immigration in moral terms. The assumption was that integration was automatic, that the school system and the universal ideals of citizenship would erase inequality over time, but they didn't. By the 1980s, unemployment began to rise, industries declined, and social mobility slowed. Entire communities in the banlieues were left behind. At the same time, young people from immigrant backgrounds, born in France, fluent in the language, felt rejected by a society that still saw them as outsiders. The promise of equality turned into resentment, and as the economy stagnated, identity returned as a political force. The far-right National Front, led by Jean-Marie Le Pen, began gaining votes by speaking about the issues others avoided: immigration, insecurity, and national identity. For decades, mainstream parties dismissed him as a fringe extremist, but with every election, his message resonated more, not just because of fear, but because many ordinary citizens felt something was changing around them. Their neighborhoods, their schools, their sense of order, and no one in power seemed willing to name it. Then came 2005. In the suburb of Clichy-sous-Bois, 2 teenagers of North African descent were electrocuted while hiding from police. The incident sparked 3 weeks of nationwide riots. Thousands of cars burned, hundreds of arrests, and a level of unrest not seen in France since 1968. It was a turning point. The riots revealed what the official ideology had hidden: 2 Frances living side by side but apart. One France, prosperous, urban, and confident in its values. The other, marginalized, angry, and disconnected from the national narrative. In the following decade, the gap widened. Terrorist attacks struck the country repeatedly. Toulouse in 2012, Charlie Hebdo and the Bataclan in 2015, Nice in 2016, and many smaller ones since. Each time, the shock was followed by the same debate. Was this about Islam, about inequality, about failed integration? And each time, the country struggled to answer without tearing itself apart. By 2020, France had endured more Islamist terror attacks than any other Western country since 2010. But the violence wasn't just about religion, it was about identity. The attackers often came from within. Second or third generation citizens, raised in France, educated in French schools, yet drawn to extremist ideologies that promised belonging where society offered alienation. The state responded with tougher security laws, school programs on secularism, and stricter control of religious organizations. But behind these measures lay a deeper crisis, a crisis of belief. The Republic had promised to create unity by erasing difference, yet difference had become impossible to ignore. The old model of assimilation was breaking down, but no new one had replaced it. The question that once defined France, what does it mean to be free, was quietly replaced by another. What does it mean to be French? As France entered the 2020s, the old questions of integration and identity turned into open confrontation. The same country that once prided itself on debate and intellectual freedom now found itself trapped between silence and outrage. Every incident, a riot, a protest, a crime, became a national referendum on who France belonged to. The state's response followed a familiar pattern. After each crisis, politicians promised reforms, more resources for the suburbs, the secular principles separating religion from public life. But the deeper problem wasn't infrastructure or policing. It was the erosion of the invisible glue that had once held the Republic together: trust. For decades, France's civic identity relied on 3 pillars: equality through education, unity through secularism, and legitimacy through the state. All 3 are now under pressure. The first crack appeared in the schools. French public education had long been the pride of the Republic, the place where citizens learned not only math and grammar, but the values of reason, critical thinking, and belonging to a shared nation. Teachers were civil servants, respected and trusted. But over the past 20 years, classrooms have become battlegrounds of culture and authority. In 2020, the murder of history teacher Samuel Paty, beheaded by an Islamist extremist after showing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad during a lesson on free speech, shocked the nation. It wasn't just an attack on a teacher, it was an attack on the very foundation of the Republic. For many French citizens, that moment marked a before and after, a sense that something fundamental had changed, that the Republic's values could no longer be taken for granted. Teachers began to report growing tension in classes, where discussing topics like religion, gender, or history often led to conflict. In some neighborhoods, students openly challenged the principle of secularism, arguing that their faith or community came first. What had once been universal was now contested. The second crack appeared in the economy. Despite being one of the largest economies in the world, France suffers from chronic unemployment, especially among the young and among those with immigrant backgrounds. In many suburbs, youth unemployment exceeds 30%. Generations of families have grown up dependent on welfare, trapped in cycles of low income and low mobility. For some, the welfare state that once symbolized equality now feels like a system of quiet exclusion, generous enough to survive, but not enough to advance. This economic divide fuels resentment on all sides. Working-class French citizens in smaller towns feel abandoned by elites in Paris, who they say care more about global issues than local hardship. Immigrant families in the suburbs feel locked out of opportunity and targeted by stereotypes. Both feel ignored, and both are right in their own way. The result is a country where social anger no longer has a clear direction. That anger erupted visibly in 2018 with the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest protests. What began as a demonstration against rising fuel prices became an explosion of frustration against the entire political class. Week after week, tens of thousands took to the streets wearing the same fluorescent vests used for roadside emergencies. A symbol of citizens who felt invisible until they had to stop traffic to be seen. It was a rebellion without ideology, left-wing, right-wing, rural, urban, united only by disillusionment. The government responded with police force and concessions, but the damage was already done. The Yellow Vests proved something that France's elites had ignored for years. The Republic was no longer unified by class, geography, or even purpose. The gap between Paris and the provinces, between the winners of globalization and those left behind, had become unbridgeable. Then came the pandemic, which deepened every fracture. Lockdowns, mandates, and curfews reignited distrust between citizens and the state. Protests over vaccine passes filled the same streets that had once hosted anti-terror vigils. In a country that invented modern citizenship, citizens were starting to lose faith in the system itself. Meanwhile, France's political map was changing. Traditional parties collapsed. The socialists and the Republicans, who had dominated for half a century, were reduced to irrelevance. In their place rose two new poles. On one side, the centrist technocracy of Emmanuel Macron, a president who presented himself as pragmatic and globalist. On the other, the nationalist populism of Marine Le Pen, who promised protection, order, and a return to roots. The 2022 presidential election wasn't just a contest of policies, it was a clash of identities. Macron spoke for the urban, educated, pro-European France. Le Pen spoke for the rural, disillusioned, inward-looking France. Between them lay a shrinking middle ground. At the same time, a new far-right movement, led by television commentator Eric Zemmour, entered the scene, more intellectual, more radical, and openly nostalgic for a France that no longer exists. His message was clear. Immigration, multiculturalism, and moral relativism were destroying French civilization from within. Many dismissed him as alarmist, but his rise showed how far the debate had shifted. What had once been taboo to say was now discussed on primetime television. And yet, on the other end of the spectrum, France's progressive elite continued to double down on universalism and inclusion, arguing that racism and inequality were the real problems, not immigration, but discrimination, not religion, but poverty. The two narratives clashed endlessly, each one accusing the other of denying reality. Caught in the middle were ordinary citizens, teachers, workers, police officers, doctors, who simply wanted normalcy but felt trapped in a permanent moral argument. When riots broke out again in 2023 after the police shooting of a teenager in Nanterre, the pattern repeated. Outrage, protests, accusations, and then silence. For many it felt like déjà vu. The same scenes as 2005, the same anger, the same sense that nothing truly changes. What makes France's situation so unique is that it isn't a failed state, it's a functioning one, but a fractured one. The institutions work, the infrastructure stands, the culture thrives. But beneath that structure, trust has evaporated. The Republic still speaks in the language of unity, but fewer people believe in it. The national motto, liberty, equality, fraternity, is still engraved on every town hall, but for many, it feels like a promise made to someone else. And so, France lives in contradiction. It is a secular state where religion shapes politics, a democracy where protests never stop, a wealthy country where poverty feels permanent, a nation that preaches equality but fears difference. Every few years, a moment like the attack in Ile-de-Léron reminds the country that its fractures can turn violent. But even on the days without tragedy, the tension is there, quiet, constant, unresolved. France today is not collapsing, but it is drifting. The Republic still stands, but its confidence wavers. It's a country that has lost faith not in democracy itself, but in its ability to renew it. For a nation that once reinvented the modern world every century, standing still feels like decline. On the surface, France remains everything it has always been. Beautiful, cultured, alive. Paris still draws millions of tourists. Its universities still attract thinkers from around the world. Its technology and luxury industries remain global leaders. But beyond the postcard image, a quiet weariness defines daily life. People still argue passionately about politics, but fewer believe politics can change anything. Institutions still promise equality, but citizens measure inequality everywhere they look. And in that gap between promise and perception, new forms of identity have emerged. In some neighborhoods, community now means religion, origin, or shared struggle, not the republic. In others, identity is nostalgia for a France of order, of clarity, of imagined unity. Both sides long for belonging, and both feel it slipping away. The irony is that France has always thrived on conflict. The revolution itself was born from disagreement, the belief that through struggle, truth would emerge. But what happens when the conflicts multiply and never resolve? When every argument becomes a question of who deserves to speak and every solution feels temporary? The problem isn't just politics, it's fatigue. A national fatigue born from decades of crisis. Economic stagnation, endless protests, terrorist attacks, pandemic, inflation. Each new wave leaves the same residue: cynicism. In surveys, more than 2/3 of French people say they no longer trust the political system, and nearly half say democracy works poorly. These are not fringe opinions, they are the mainstream. Yet even in disillusionment, the French instinct remains intellectual. The country debates its own decline with more passion than others discuss their future. Newspapers analyze the crisis of civilization. TV panels argue whether the republic still exists. Books about the end of France top bestseller lists. This obsession with introspection is both symptom and survival mechanism. Because in France, despair itself has always been part of identity. The idea that questioning everything, even one's own destiny, is a kind of virtue. But this time, the questions feel heavier. The generation growing up today doesn't remember the post-war boom, the optimism of the 1960s, or even the social victories of the 1980s. They've grown up in a permanent state of tension between terrorism and tolerance, between progress and paralysis. They see a society that talks endlessly about rights, but struggles to define responsibilities. They inherit a country that taught the world liberty, but now polices speech, that built secularism, but now fears religion, that preaches equality, but feels divided by class and culture. And still, despite everything, there's resilience. France may be divided, but it is not indifferent. When tragedy strikes, whether a terror attack, a fire in Notre Dame, or violence like that in Ile-de-Léron, the same country that argues over everything finds brief unity in mourning, compassion, and pride. The instinct to defend La République remains powerful even among those who criticize it most fiercely. That tension between cynicism and faith is what keeps France alive. But it also reveals the paradox at the heart of modern France. It wants to be both universal and unique, both moral and practical, both a nation of individuals and a community of equals. Those ideals worked when the world was simpler, when belonging meant citizenship and identity meant shared values. Today, in a globalized, digital, and fractured world, those words no longer guarantee meaning. Immigration, religion, and inequality are only the visible symptoms. Immigration, religion, and inequality are only the visible symptoms. The deeper illness is existential, the loss of a collective narrative. For centuries, France told the world that reason could replace faith, that equality could replace hierarchy, that humanity could replace tribe. But what happens when reason no longer inspires, equality feels impossible, and tribe returns stronger than ever? Some say France must rediscover pride, to accept that patriotism is not a sin. Others say it must double down on its universalism, to prove that diversity and unity can coexist. Most citizens, somewhere in between, just want the noise to stop, to live without fear, without moral lectures, without constant crisis. But the noise is the sound of a country arguing with its own soul. The stakes go beyond France, because the French model, universalism, secularism, the social state, inspired much of the modern West. If it fails here, what does that say for the rest of us? If the republic that taught the world freedom of thought can no longer defend it in its own classrooms, what does that mean for democracy itself? For now, the republic endures, not because it is unbreakable, but because there is still no better alternative. Even as cynicism grows, most French citizens still believe in the rule of law and public education, in the idea that the state should protect the weak, that faith, fragile as it is, remains the last common ground. But common ground is shrinking. France's future will depend on whether it can rediscover what made it unique, not its perfection, but its courage to question itself without destroying itself. Because history has shown that when France loses faith in its own ideals, the world loses something too. The attack in Ile-de-Laurent will fade from the headlines, like so many before it, but each one leaves a trace, another reminder that liberty without security, equality without opportunity, and fraternity without trust are just words on marble. What once made France admired was not its slogans, but its belief that those words could mean something real. Today, that belief is flickering, not gone, but fragile. A country of immense beauty and intellect, living in the shadow of its own greatness. A nation still proud of what it once was and afraid of what it's becoming. France is not broken, but it is tired. And tired nations don't fall all at once. They fade, piece by piece, until one day they wake up and no longer recognize themselves. Whether France finds renewal or resignation will depend on whether it can, once again, turn disillusionment into reinvention. Because that has always been France's gift, to collapse, to doubt, and then to rise, transforming pain into progress and crisis into clarity. The world still watches, not just out of curiosity, but because somewhere deep down, we still expect France to show us how to begin again. That's the end of today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to check out the next one.